Hare Krishna, Narada Prabhu. Thank you so much for coming onto our podcast. I'm delighted to be with you and hear from you about everything you're up to. You recently had my wife and I on your show, which was a real, as soon as you invited me, my life changed. I didn't tell you this, but I was at work and when I saw your message, and I did not enjoy my previous job. It was, 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. stacking boxes. And so there I am, I'm miserable. And then I see your text and I'm like, I was so lit up. I was like, wow, I've been invited onto a podcast, like onto like the number one, number two. I don't know which it is right now. You're often giving us updates. Which is it? Where is it now?
Well, it depends how you define or interpret statistics.
Uh-huh.
We're certainly getting more views per month and per week.
Got it. Well, whatever
Um,
it is, I was stoked to be on your podcast. So anyway, thank you for that. And yeah, now you're on this podcast on the other side. So um is there anything what should I say here? Yeah, welcome to the show, Prabhu. How do you roll?
it's great to be here, Prabhuji. Thank you for inviting me onto your show. Even though I present a podcast, um, it's very rare that I ever get invited onto anyone else's podcast. And I think this is possibly the first time ever I've been invited onto something. People are worried about what I'm going to say, but thankfully you're not worried.
Did you say people are worried about what I'm gonna say or
Yeah,
you
I think so. People are worried about what I'm going to say. They shouldn't be worried. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just that. Maybe that's just in my head. Um,
yeah.
but
Yeah, it's great.
well,
Okay.
thank you. And it's also I feel very honored, and it's great to be associated with you and your wife. Because I've known of you both for many years because of social media. Because of the power of social media. You feel that you know people really well, and actually you don't really know them at all. But for example, when you're updating your social media platforms with pictures of your graffiti work, I see it every day. So I feel like I'm interacting with you every day, and I'm not. It's so yeah, it's great to be associated with you and your family as well. Thank you.
It's cool. All right. Well, yeah, firstly, Prabhu, just so people can get a little bit related with who you are, is there anything you want to share? Yeah, can you just share a little bit about who you are? And then we'll get into a project that that's dear to you. And you've got a few projects, and we're going to maybe hear about them all, but focus on this one. Um, but yeah, before we go there, was there anything you'd like to create with um, the viewers about who you are?
Yeah, okay. Well, my initiated name in the Hare Krishna tradition is Narada Das. I've been around the Hare Krishna movement for over 20 years, which I can't quite believe it when I say 20 years. I was 20 years old. I'm now 20 years older than that. I was 20 years old. And I came to Krishna consciousness through the academic route. So I didn't meet devotees in the streets. I didn't hear George Harrison on the radio, all that type of thing. I was studying religions at university, and I was just fascinated with religions. And I still am. I read lots of different types of books. And when I was 19, 20, I was sent to Bhaktivedanta Manor, which is run by ISKCON in the UK, to study the Hare Krishnas. Anyway, I ended up joining to cut a long story short, and that was 20 years ago. It's been an adventure over the last 20 years, to say the least.
Mm.
I've never um, been a brahmachari. I've never lived in a temple. I've always, what's a good expression to use? I've always tried to keep one foot in spiritual, kind of pursuing spiritual stuff, and one foot kind of in the material world, pursuing material things, also recognizing they don't make me happy, but I always chose to work outside of the temple rather than live inside. Um, I work in marketing and journalism and event organization. Um, I write books. One book's out, two are coming out next year. And my interest is kind of in the sociology of religion. So, I mean, I have an interest in theology and philosophy, but the sociology of things, why people do what they do,
Mm,
um, is really interesting to me.
mm.
Um, what else to say? I've um, yeah, I mean that's probably it in a nutshell. And I also produce a podcast as well, and many people know the story. I never wanted to do a podcast. I never planned to, and then we had that thing, the global pandemic, and I had a lot of time, and someone suggested that I should do a podcast, and I started it, and 4 years later, it's still going. And at times it's been tough, and on at least two occasions I thought of stopping it, and then something happens, and this, you know, and 4 years later we're still going, and it's great.
It is great. Your podcast is awesome. Thanks for continuing
Thank
to.
you,
Do you
thank
ever
you.
find it challenging to like be consistent with it, and like, do you ever not feel like doing it?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There have been occasions when I felt like giving it up and not doing it, and I think then Krishna. I'm guessing it's Krishna, someone then sends me a message, oh, I could be on your podcast. And I ask them what their story is. And their story is like, wow, that's quite a big story. And so, yeah, consistency. And, but last week, episode 150 went out. And I think it's now that it's 150, it's well established. And I also feel like I don't have to do one a week or twice, two a week to kind of, I
Yeah.
had in my head, I had some numbers I wanted to meet, and
Yes.
I've met those numbers.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get to 150 by the end of this year, and we beat that 6 weeks in advance. So actually, I could just do none now to 2025,
Right.
but I've still got people messaging me because they want to be on the podcast.
Right.
And I think because the podcast is independent, we're not linked to any mat or group. People have a bit more freedom of what they can say.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's still a little bit of regulation. I can't allow people to say anything, but there's a bit more. And I think my vibe is giving a voice to the voiceless. You know,
Yes.
I always try and support the underdog, people that have had their voice silenced. And so that's my passion, giving people their voice back. Um, so yeah, it's still going. It's still going.
Mm. You know, it's it's a service to the devotee community because obviously, devotees get to hear about um, you know, topics that they wouldn't have otherwise if you didn't have such a diverse kind of the people that you interview are diverse. So you get to hear different angles on different things. So it's a service in that way, but it's a real service to the devotee you're interviewing. Like I was saying, it really lit me up to have the opportunity to share. Like you say, you're supporting the underdog though, and giving a voice to the people who, like you say, maybe they've been silenced or some version of that, or that they just may not get an opportunity to share. And I think everyone's got something to share, but then often many people aren't ever given a platform to share. So it's a great service that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. I'm grateful to you and everyone else that continues to tune in. And I'm sure some more big controversial ones will come up soon. In fact, they
Yeah,
will. I just can't tell you what.
yeah, right. Mm. Awesome. Well, okay. Well, one of the projects you shared with me in our recent conversation was about the League of Devotees. Can you tell us a little bit about, or tell us a lot about that? That's like what.
Yeah. Yeah. How long have you got? So the League of Devotees. So I'm going to try and tell you the short story because I could talk forever on this. So um, in all of my life, I've always been into bridge building, bringing people
Mm,
together, collaborative working, and trying to find common ground. And a couple of years ago, I wrote a book about the history and diversity of the Hare Krishna movement in Britain. And because it was kind of like I was going through, well, I wasn't going through a midlife crisis, but I turned 35 5 years ago, and all of my grandparents died at the age of 70 for some reason. So I was thinking, well, I'm 35 now. I need to start doing something with my life. So I'm going to write a book. So I wrote a book. What am I going to write about? So I wrote about all the different Hare Krishna groups in Britain. And it was wonderful because it was a learning experience for me. It was a chance for me to go back to university. I mean, not literally, and study all these kind of religious groups within the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And to cut a long story short, I identified that in Britain there were 20 different Hare Krishna groups. So effectively, that's ISKCON and 19 others. And most of us will come from ISKCON. Our background will be in ISKCON. And I remember when I first joined ISKCON, there was this whole thing around something called the Gaudiya Mat. And it was, don't join the Gaudiya Mat. Don't have anything to do with the Gaudiya Mat. And for many years, I guess I kind of adhered to that. And I remember, and I developed these thoughts in my head, or this picture in my head, that the Gaudiya Mat was this rival organization that existed to challenge ISKCON, and they had lots of festivals and lots of people and lots of gurus. And then, I guess to my disappointment, I found that the Gaudiya Mat as an institution actually disbanded in 1937. So I'm thinking, what is this Gaudiya Mat they're on about? So the first thing that I had to do for myself was distill or dispel this idea that something called the Gaudiya Mat existed as a separate entity, and actually it doesn't. It refers to something which I could talk about at another time. So anyway, I started to do all this research on these groups and things, and I recognized that a lot of them have a lot of things in common. A lot of them have a lot of things in common, and I started to identify temples and centers that were independent from ISKCON, and that were pretty much trying to achieve the same thing. And I remember being very surprised but delighted when one day I discovered that there was a Hare Krishna temple in England and one in France, which I didn't do research on, but it was just over the water in France, that they were trying to do the same thing and they didn't know of each other's existence. So I literally remember emailing them both one day to say, do you know each other exists? And you're pretty much in agreement on 99% of issues. So that's how the League of Devotees started. The League of Devotees started as an attempt to bring all these groups together that were independent from, let's call it the GBC ISKCON, because when people say ISKCON, it means different things to different people. And that's largely based on statements that Prabhupada made. So yes, ISKCON is the institution, but also Prabhupada made references to ISKCON being wherever the holy name is chanted. So if you interpret that literally, it means that ISKCON's everything. Wherever the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is chanted, it's everything. So I'm also, when I say I'm Mr. Inclusive, I don't mean that in an arrogant way, or that, because sometimes that's not always a good thing. I won't always admit that. But I remember going to one temple in London, which was a different mat completely. So mat means mission, if anyone's confused. It's kind of an old-fashioned term. The Sri Chaitanya Sarasa mat, the Sri Gaudiya Chaitanya mat, the Gaudiya mat. And so I went to this temple, and this temple manager said, Narada, I've noticed that you want to include everybody. But she said, you can't include everybody. It's not possible. I said, well, I want to include as many people as possible then. That's my challenge. How can we be as inclusive as possible? Just as Prabhupada was. If you look at Prabhupada's kind of earthly ministry, it's a bit of a Christian term, in the 60s and 70s, when he was physically present, he was super inclusive. He wanted to include as many people as possible, even if, they had fallen short of the expectations like we all do. He wanted to include people. So I remember talking with a gentleman, a wonderful gentleman called Gauranga Sundara Prabhu one day. So he is the temple president at the Hare Krishna Center in Leicester, which is Leicester's a city in England. So it's an independent temple. And he said, Narada, there was an attempt a number of years ago to bring all of the independent temples and centers together. Um, um, but I reckon that you could do this. I mean, not single-handedly, but you have a because you've just published this book and because you're keen to bring people together, you could do this. So I kind of took it on as a challenge. So we had a conversation about, I hate this word, but I'm going to use it, the membership. Because it sounds like we're creating another organization, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So membership with a small n. And we had three different options to the League of Devotees. We knew that was going to be the name from the beginning because that was a name that Prabhupada had used originally in the 1950s. So it was kind of sanctioned or blessed by Prabhupada. So we wanted to create a network of independent Hare Krishna temples and centers and projects that would come together. But the membership, we had a conversation about that because we had three options. So the first option on the table was every single Hare Krishna group in existence that wasn't part of ISKCON, of GBC ISKCON. That was option one. But that would include all the mats, the disciples of Narayana Maharaj, Sridhar Maharaj, Bhakti Vallabha Tirtha Maharaj, all the different groups. Option two was all of the Hare Krishna groups, temples, and projects that take shelter of Prabhupada, including the Ritviks. Okay. And option three was all the temples, centers, and projects that take shelter of Prabhupada, not including the Ritviks. So we rolled out option one quite soon on, which was all the groups in existence, because even though I would love everyone to come together and work together, I'm a bit of a, my mum said I was always a bit naive. She says, you shouldn't believe everything everyone says all the time. So we rolled that out, unfortunately, because we realized we had to, what's that expression? We had to pin our mast to something. We had to draw the line in the sand somewhere. So obviously Prabhupada had to be our meeting point, our central concept, person, guru, teacher that brings people together. And then we had this long conversation about the Ritviks. So just to be really clear, I am, what shall I say? It doesn't bother me that people are Ritvik or not. You won't often hear a devotee say that. That's the other thing coming from an ISKCON background. It's not just the Gaudiya mat. Stay away from the Ritviks because they're terrible and they're this and they're that and they're trying to steal our property. But anyway, through my own research in my book, I identified, for example, that there's 4 different Ritvik groups in Britain.
Yeah.
And to my surprise, they also were divided and they didn't work together, so it's just Kali Yuga. It happens everywhere. So we made a decision that we weren't going to include the Ritviks and the League of Devotees. And we had a mature conversation about that, and not being offensive to any of my Ritvik friends, because I actually do have some. One of our temples in our network that we have finally established does have sannyasis, and it does have a initiating Diksha Guru. And we really felt that we had to at least recognize that the Parampara system by Diksha and Shiksha must carry on. For me personally, this is a personal view, not necessarily a view of the League of Devotees. The Parampara system must carry on through a process of Diksha initiation. Prabhupada's July the 9th, 1977 letter was, I didn't expect to talk about this today, was for a period of time in 1977. That was an instruction that Prabhupada gave, but it wasn't meant to be forever and a day. It was meant to be for a period of time whilst Prabhupada was physically unwell or ill and not able to, carry out initiations himself. So we recognized that we wanted to be a network of organizations that allowed and supported Diksha initiation. So ultimately, for the founding creation of the League of Devotees, this time, part 2.0, because 1.0 was 1953. So yeah, 70 odd years later, we identified 3 groups that fitted this criteria. So I'll tell you what they are, and I'll read out our mission statement. So the three founding groups are the Hare Krishna Project, which is the group that I run. So we don't have a temple, we don't have a center in that sense. We are a group of devotees in the UK that travel around the UK to organize festivals. We visit schools, we do book distribution. I produce a podcast and that kind of thing. And so that's us. You've then got the Hare Krishna Center in Leicester, which is a group of devotees there. And you've got the Radha Kripa Mission, which is in northwest France. So they're a fantastic, just wonderful group of devotees that I discovered via social media 2 years ago. And when I say I've fallen in love with them, not literally, but I've really grown fond of them. So we put together a mission statement. When I say we had meetings, they weren't long, boring meetings. I haven't got time for long, boring meetings. We had a number of meetings to set out our aims and objectives. So initially, the League of Devotees is a federation of independent centers. It's a support network. It's a network of association. And what we're very keen to do is to share ideas, resources, and best practice. Now, I'm going to give ISKCON some praise now. One of the things I think that ISKCON's good at a lot of stuff. One of the things that ISKCON's good at is that the temples, for example, ISKCON in the UK has, I think, 12 temples, and they're very good at supporting each other. And you'll have that support network where you have traveling preachers, traveling sannyasis, and there's an expression, looking after their own. Lots of religious groups will do that. You look after your own. And so the League of Devotees, by the way, is not an attempt to recreate ISKCON or recreate the Hare Krishna movement. There are some commentators that want to restart the Hare Krishna movement, and that's just not possible. We're not interested in that. We're just interested in providing a space where independent temples and centers can come together. So those three have come together. I could read out our mission statement just really quickly, which is effectively the League of Devotees is a network of independent Gaudiya Vaishnava temples and projects, supporting and encouraging one another under the shelter of Srila Prabhupada. We're inspired to share the teachings of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada with the general public, whoever they are or wherever they are from. And the network is an opportunity for devotees to come together, and it allows temples, as I've said, to share resources, ideas, and best practice. And really important as well, the League of Devotees fosters a positive approach to working with others and looks for opportunities for meaningful sadhu sangha. So as an organization, we don't criticize. I mean, we are very keen to encourage people. And since we went public on the 27th of August this year, which was Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja this year. And since then, we have identified at least 6 or 7 other temples and centers that fit the mold, that would be suitable organizations to join the League of Devotees, and we're in dialogue and in conversation with them.
Yeah. Right. So what I can really hear is your commitment to bringing people together, and it's kind of similar to your commitment to giving platform to the voiceless, rooting for the underdog. Can really, I really have a sense of who you are in the world, in terms of your values and your commitment. Do you ever face, like, I don't know, opposition, like people saying, like, for example, the person who said to you, you can't just include everyone. What was his like concern, or what do you think he was valuing when he said that?
Well, I think with this particular devotee, it was in reference to, as a lot of devotees have, loyalty to a particular guru, and that everything should understandably be in loyalty to that particular guru. And I'm trying to think of that actual example in that conversation. Was I suggesting anything that would have been in an offense to that guru, and I don't think so. This was not an ISKCON guru. Uh, so no, I don't think so. I think also this person was how I would describe a bit more socially conservative than I am.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
uh, some people are more socially liberal, some people are socially conservative.
Right.
But in terms of your question, do I face pushback? And yes, believe it or not, I have my critics. And it's a bit of a big word, but I have my enemies. There are people that don't like me, and there will be reasons for that. Um,
That's what I want
uh,
to hear. What's what's the biggest kind of concern that you've had coming from others about the League of Devotees?
well, there's been no criticism of the League of Devotees yet, which is good, I think. I mean, there was, I mean, not that I'm aware of. I mean, one devotee messaged me recently to say that um, he thought the League of Devotees was just another attempt to create something that is going to fail and everything else has failed and he's loyal to Prabhupada, so it's best to stay in ISKCON. And I mean, that's a view that he has, and he's entitled to that view. But in terms of the League of Devotees, I'm not aware there's been any criticism. The struggle that we're having, use that word really, like the struggle, is a lot of the groups that we are in private conversation with and we're trying to network with and we're trying to get them to join us. they've all they're all independent centers and temples because they've had a lot of bad history, usually with ISKCON. What example could I give here on
The juiciest one.
the juiciest one? So I don't have permission to share a lot of these stories. Okay, I'm gonna give you one example, but I'm not gonna narrow it down too much. So there is I'm really not, because I don't want people to know which temple I'm talking about. There is an ISKCON temple in Western Europe that that has had a love-hate relationship with GBC ISKCON for about 10 years. It's still an ISKCON, and for different reasons, it's never really molded with the rest of the GBC network. And any day now, I've heard that expression for 2 months. Any day now, this temple's going to leave ISKCON. And this temple has a big community. And we have we have been in dialogue with them about joining the League of Devotees. Join us, join us, join us. And the response is, and I can understand this, if they leave ISKCON, their number one priority is not to join another organization. There is a group of devotees. Okay, I will say this, another example. There is a group of devotees in Scotland that are now operating independently from ISKCON. They're setting up their own group, and they have a lot of emotional, psychological baggage from abuse in ISKCON. And I've been saying to their leader or their secretary for at least 6 months, join us, join us, join us. And he says, Narada, we just want to be on our own for a year. We're so, he didn't use the word traumatized, but I'm going to use it. They're so traumatized by being in a bigger organization, being treated badly. They don't want to join another organization. And I can understand that. So they just want to find their feet, be independent, small I independent for a year. And then maybe after a year, they'll join a bigger network of independent temples. So those are examples of two groups that we're kind of networking in. And I think groups are just suspicious about, you know, maybe me coming along. Hey, join the League of Devotees. I mean, because they like their independence, and there's that worry that you associate with something else. What might happen?
Um, well, if you asked me, if you called me and say I was running a Namahata or something like that, and I don't know, was generating a lot of new devotees, and so it's starting to look like a temple of some sort, or some kind of independent project. And then you called me and you said, "Oh, you should join the League of Devotees." I'd probably be skeptical too, mainly because um, I don't know what that entails or means. That's the only reason I'd be skeptical. So like it, however, if you called up and said, "Hey, would you like to um, share resources, best practice, basically like the mission statement that you quoted earlier. Would you like to be a part of that?" I'd be like, hell yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. Thank you for that. Maybe we need to pitch it in a different way. I mean, because we have literally identified 6 or 7 or 8 groups that, and a lot of them are in Europe actually. Uh, and actually, one of them's in Australia, where you are. There's a
Oh,
there's a temple just down the road from you
yeah,
that would
yeah.
definitely be suitable for the League of Devotees, and at least 1 or 2 groups in New Zealand as well.
Yeah, right.
Um, so yeah. Thank you for the advice. I can certainly take that forward and see if the response is any different.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was just thinking, like join the League of Devotees. It's like seems like a big step. And it seems like you're changing something, you're changing your allegiance, which is very personal to people, like, right? Like you're saying before, you
Yeah.
had that devotee come to you and say, "Look, Prabhu, I'm loyal to Prabhupada." So when you say, join the League of Devotees, it's like, will that mess with my loyalty? Will that impact on what will that mean for my loyalty? Will I be being loyal by doing that? What would yeah, any thoughts on that?
Loyalty to, did you say loyalty to Prabhupada? Did you?
That's what that devotee said to you, right? Like, hey, Prabhu, I'm just loyal to Prabhupada. Um,
Well, I mean, my answer to that is it might sound a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but it depends how we interpret Prabhupada's role now, or
mhm,
Prabhupada's transcendental mission now. And uh, Prabhupada, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the League of Devotees, has a transcendental role for all people, and you don't have to be part of a particular organization to take shelter of Prabhupada and to follow Prabhupada. A great example would be there are millions or maybe even billions of Christians in the world that are
right.
not part of any church, that follow Jesus Christ as their savior, their guru, their teacher, but they're not part of any church for a whole range of reasons. And Prabhupada is accessible to all people, not just those that attend an ISKCON temple or have an ISKCON guru or
But
give
Prabhu,
money to ISKCON.
that's what all the Ritviks say.
It is. But we also recognize that there can be Diksha gurus after, so something we would agree with ISKCON on, there can be Diksha gurus after Prabhupada that help carry on the Parampara line or the system. But Prabhupada has a very special role as kind of as a Shakti Vaishnava in this age. Um, the enabler, it's like a school. Prabhupada's the headmaster of the school, and the teachers are there under the guidance
Right.
of yeah.
Kind of
And
like
actually,
Iyengar yoga, whereas like where Iyengar is I don't know if he's still, anyway, in either case, he has so many students teaching his right hot yoga thing, um, you know, in line with the way he set it up. Kind of like that.
yeah, yeah, and actually, I mean, I'm kind of just thinking aloud, I guess. I mean, a bona fide and proper Diksha guru in the line of Srila Prabhupada, uh, what would you recognize or see in them? They would be also following Prabhupada and leading you to Prabhupada. Um, so I mean, in the League of Devotees at the moment, we have one Diksha Guru, and he is 108% Prabhupada. I can tell you, he's Prabhupada through and through. He's just completely in love and devoted to Prabhupada. And we have another leader in the league who is, I'd say, a Shiksha Guru to many, and he is Prabhupada through and through. Um, so yeah, so
Yeah.
a lot of things are based on interpretation, I'd say,
What do you mean by
and
that?
semantics. Um, Well, it's this whole idea of whether you can only access Prabhupada in the institution of ISKCON or not.
Mm,
A lot of people stay in ISKCON because it's the institution that Prabhupada established absolutely. But is it the same institution? 50 years have passed by. Does it have the same vision and values and priorities? And a lot of people give different answers to that. You know, there's a whole thing in Christianity. What would Jesus do? Sometimes you see the wristbands. What would Jesus
Mm,
do? What would Prabhupada do? If
mm.
Prabhupada physically came back now, what would he think of the ISKCON temples and the ISKCON communities? And people have to answer that based on what they feel, I guess.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing because we're all kind of constantly faced with that question and challenge. Like, what would Prabhupada think of X? Whatever the new thing is that, like for example, Facebook, even, a lot of devotees say, I wonder if Prabhupada would use Facebook. Everyone I've talked to said, I think he definitely would encourage its use in Krishna service.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Um, I mean, and I think the best reference to go from for that would be his use of microphones and what he said about that, right? He said, um, everything has to be using Krishna service, just like this microphone, right? I can't remember the full quote, but I think he even said, just like the snake, the rabbit or the hare, some animal makes a hole and goes and lives in it, and then
Mm.
the snake takes advantage of the hole that's already been made, goes in there, probably eats the the rabbit, and then lives in there himself. Um, I think that's the example, right? Like devotees can use everything that's made, even by the demons for demoniac purposes, take it, like, and use it almost as a matter of duty. Like we have to use it in Krishna service to benefit, right? The
Mm.
creation of the thing. Um, so where was I going with that? The yeah, this idea of like interpreting this point about yeah, what would Prabhupada do? And then everyone's going to have their own opinions or interpretations of Prabhupada, how he was about things. And it's probably going to be colored a lot by their own biases, right?
Mm.
Like, I want
Mm.
to use it, and now I'm going to justify it by citing this thing, right? That Prabhupada said. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. A lot of things are open to interpretation. Like you and I could read a newspaper, exactly the same newspaper, and read the same news story, but we
Right,
might take from it different things
right.
based on our
No,
views, our values, our
yes,
political persuasion, our background, our
right.
upbringing. It's the
Mm,
same also with watching a film, and I think so I agree completely, and I am of the view when we read statements of Prabhupada's, we have to often understand the context
mm,
that they're given in. Now, again, even when the Hare Krishna movement, you've got some devotees that say, no, there's no context. Just take it as it is. Take the statements of Prabhupada as they are, and this is what they mean. Whereas others are over here and say, well, with some things I agree with that. I actually gave a talk about a year and a half ago on a postmodern approach to Krishna consciousness. And postmodernism is this concept of having multiple truths. So
mm,
what I clearly said was that there are some things that are not changeable in the Krishna consciousness movement, such as Prabhupada's statements around the regulative principles, chanting a minimum of 16 rounds a day, because he was consistent on those statements, completely consistent. But other issues around, whether you have pizza and chips or dal and rice, or whether you wear trousers or dhoti, uh, uh, I think those are relative statements. I mean, dress code is an interesting one because there were certainly statements of Prabhupada's, but he really did talk about the importance of, wearing a dhoti and wearing those types of clothing. But there are also statements of Prabhupada, but he said dress is a dead thing. This dress isn't really important. So actually, you have to look at the context he was saying it. And also, it's based on if he wrote a letter to a particular disciple of his, um, what did that disciple need to hear at that time in their life?
right. And
Uh,
that's why
uh,
devotees oftentimes say the best reference is the books because they're, you know, the law books for mankind
Yeah.
for the 10,000 years. Whereas letters, some devotees say they shouldn't have been circulated. They shouldn't be, they shouldn't have been read out to the congregation. They were for one devotee.
Yes, that's a really good point. I mean, another example would be the statements that Prabhupada made about his godbrothers. So he absolutely at times made some statements that were not very positive, but there are also statements that he made that were very positive about his godbrothers. So what's the context?
Right.
You know, why was he saying making that statement at that point in time?
Mm.
You know, so we have to have just a bit of an open mind, I think, to understand the context of what Prabhupada said.
Just to kind of churn that a little bit more, I'm kind of like deepening my understanding of the word context. Um, the way it's created or sort of defined or distinguished in landmark education is like, so one thing I got from a recent course I did with landmark is that things occur a certain way depending on the context. So, for example, if I'm on a stage public speaking, um, and I'm really or the crowd or the, you know, the audience occurs for me as scary, then that kind of points to a context. Like the context that I am is that, well, just to keep it simple, that I'm this body, and their their thoughts about my body, because that's what they're seeing, um, could somehow, or you know, the reputation they give me based on the performance of my body matters. So the context that gives the occurring is one of, you know, I'm this body. So Prabhupada saying certain things, um, yeah, it will depend on the context. Anyway, so I'm just like,
It's it's kind of like looking at the external environment. What's the external environment around somebody making statements? You know, what are the
hmm.
factors going on around?
And internally, right? Like
Yes.
it's almost like actually Stephen Covey says it concisely. He said our attitudes and behaviors flow from our paradigms.
Mm,
So
mm.
context is kind of like a paradigm. It's kind of like the way we view the world. And then everything flows from that. So, you know, if I like if I think I'm the body, then death is the worst thing. But if I think I'm the spirit soul, then death is like just a new beginning.
Mm.
Um, anyway, just yeah, fascinated by the idea that yeah, Prabhupada's he made different statements according to the context,
And according to time, place, and circumstance.
also a type of context.
Yeah. Yeah. So one example I was just thinking of, I got to think of how I say this now in case anyone interprets what I'm saying differently. So
According to the
when Prabhupada came to the West, I have to watch what I say because people accuse me of all sorts. It's quite funny actually. When Prabhupada came to the West in 1965, he came from his cultural background of India with, I guess, an intention that actually my disciples or my followers would do a certain would do certain things. And one of those was that any followers of mine should chant 64 rounds a day. Well, Prabhupada soon discovered, based on maybe the moaning and complaining of his disciples, that actually they weren't going to do 64 rounds a day. So there was a negotiation, wasn't there, with his disciples, his first disciples or earlier disciples, of reducing to 32. Then finally there was an agreement or settling on a minimum of 16. So I'm not, so maybe I guess what I'm saying is Prabhupada adjusted uh, the practice of Krishna consciousness according to time, place, and circumstance based on, can I use the word context? Based on the context of what was going on in the Western world. But these
100%.
Westerners have short attention
Yeah.
spans. They're not very focused. They've got busy lives.
Mm,
Um, and so, but a minimum of 16 rounds a day. Um, yeah.
mm.
And
Yeah.
we'd all agree that less than that, if a guru was teaching that you can do less than that, if you're initiated, it's a deviation. I
Mm.
think something we can all agree on that. Other groups will are outside of ISKCON will don't follow Prabhupada will have a less number of rounds, but we all agree a minimum of 16 rounds is true and accurate.
Right. So because of the context that we are as Prabhupada Anugas, right? Therefore, mutts that emphasize, um, say, or they just don't emphasize 16 rounds. They will occur.
No, well, I mean, again, this isn't a criticism at all, but some groups will chant in initiation, they're asked to chant a minimum of 4 rounds a day. And that's fine in the sense if you want to do a minimum of 4, you can join those groups. Uh, yeah, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but yeah, what I'm saying is that it things will occur a certain way because of the context. So if we're an ISKCON devotee and we hear that some other devotee is chanting 4 rounds, that's going to occur for us as a deviation because the context that we are is Prabhupada said 16, so 16 is the absolute right number.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If, if you're an initiated devotee, if you're an initiated devotee, it's a minimum of 16 rounds a day.
yeah, yeah. Okay, and so yeah, kind of like bringing this topic of contact to the League of Devotees. I can see that what I'm hearing is that people will, um, the League of Devotees will occur for people differently according to their context, right? Just like that devotee who said, Prabhu, I'm I'm loyal to Prabhupada. So he must have some context that loyal about what loyalty to Prabhupada is, and also what ISKCON is, and about what um, other mutts are, right? So he must, um, yeah, I think loyalty to Prabhupada means ISKCON, and not ISKCON means not loyal to Prabhupada. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I wouldn't agree with his view on that. One of the things I was pleasantly surprised by was that is when I'm saying some things on this podcast I've never said before in public.
Told you not.
When I left ISKCON 2 years ago, uh, uh, which I've never really talked about publicly for a number of reasons. When I left ISKCON 2 years ago, I thought I would be kind of on my own, or very, in a very small group of people, and I'd have to join maybe a different group. And then you discover that there's actually hundreds of you. There's hundreds of you that are still following Prabhupada, but just choose not to be a part of the institution for a whole number of reasons. And and um, I found that a very liberating feeling to find that there's a lot of you. Now, I loved how just now you kind of turned around this conversation about context back to the League of Devotees, because I actually feel the context in terms of the existence of the League of Devotees now is sometimes I feel like we're a bit ahead of our time. You know,
Mm,
I am of the view, what would I say? I'm not a prophet or a psychic in any way. I can't tell the future, but I study religions at university. I understand how religions work from a social point of view, and I do not believe. I'm going to sound so negative now. ISKCON's future as an institution looks very different from the way it does now and the way it used to look. Um, it's on a particular trajectory that won't change for about 20 or 30 years. Many sociologists and psychologists will tell you that. And there's another group of people, the Anthra, something or other. But the sociologists will tell you that this is the way ISKCON's kind of heading now. And in about 20 or 30 years, it will look like the Swaminarayan organization in terms of how it looks to the public and how it behaves. And that's fine if that's how people in the institution want to go. But you're finding more and more people are feeling isolated and lonely and outside, where they don't have to be lonely. isolated and outside now. And the League of Devotees is kind of swooping up all of these people. And there's a lot of them, I can assure you. You know, if those 15 independent temples and projects join the League of Devotees today, wow, that would be amazing. You know, and we're still we're an evolving organization. We don't want to set up another top-down hierarchical system. We're not interested in that. Somebody once asked me recently, the League of Devotees, you've all merged together. So we haven't merged together. We've still got our independence, and we still do our own things, and we may even disagree on some issues.
Mm.
I mean, there might. I mean, I'm not really sure what they are. We haven't encountered them yet, but we're allowed to disagree. We're allowed to disagree, and
Right.
we can be mature and adult about it. So,
Autonomous.
so yeah. So some bizarre example, and they know this already. I'm just giving this example. At the Radha Kripa mission in France, all the brahmacharinis wear yellow. They wear these yellow saris. And when I first saw them, I thought, well, that's a bit weird. But then I just thought, well, I don't really care. It doesn't bother me, you know. Whereas the temple in Leicester, the women don't wear yellow. It's just a small detail. Is it, you know, is our salvation dependent on what we wear? I'd
Mm.
say no, personally.
Mm.
But that's an example. So we've not merged together. We're just kind of supporting and encouraging each other. So the context of the League of Devotees today is that we're probably a bit of ahead of our time. You know, and hopefully when you interview me in a couple of years, you'll see that it's grown to a much bigger global network.
Yeah, well, I'm committed that that happens because the League of Devotees represents for me in my listening, and the way it's occurring for me is
Mm.
it represents the possibility of unity, and that's very much consistent with Prabhupada's um, mission of for ISKCON. In a couple of ways, actually, I can see that League of Devotees is more consistent with ISKCON than ISKCON, more consistent with Prabhupada's. I won't say more because I don't know everything about it or whatever, but from what I can hear, the League of Devotees' commitment and mission is almost it reminds me of the seven purposes of ISKCON, you know, and also the way that Prabhupada wanted ISKCON to be um, autonomous, like each like rather than centralized, you know.
I
So
was literally just thinking that is
yeah,
that we are, because we're an alliance rather than a singular organization.
exactly.
Our temples will maintain their independence and autonomy,
Yes,
which is what Prabhupada wanted.
yeah, it's pretty
Uh,
cool. Yeah,
Constitutionally, as a political, they have to maintain their independence because they're
yeah,
independent from each
yeah,
other.
because they are. They literally are.
Whereas in ISKCON, and this is a factual statement, not my personal view. Well, it is that, you know, temples don't have their individual autonomy anymore. I mean, everyone agrees on that. I assume even the GBC would agree with that. There's a top-down
Yeah, 100%.
hierarchical approach. You know, it's very dictatorial. I have to do it this way. I mean, that's just fact.
Yeah,
It's changed.
yeah, yeah. So it's cool what you're doing. Um, so being aware of of our time. Um, what will be the benefit of? Okay, so I got two last questions for you. How will a devotee or a sangha benefit from quote unquote joining, becoming a member of the League of Devotees? Yeah, I'll let you answer that, and then I'll ask my last question.
Okay, so there's kind of what I've already said about our mission statement in terms of sharing ideas, best practice, and resources. So it could be that there's a temple in Scotland that doesn't have many speakers. So we have 3 or 4 temples in the network already, and we can provide speakers. So there's that. One example I often give is that some of our in the league at the moment, some groups are better at things than others are better at things. So, for example, at the Hare Krishna Project, we do a lot of school programs. We visit schools, and I think we're quite good at that. It's what we like to do. But one thing we don't do is we don't provide pujari services. So, for example, we don't do outside things where we go and we do pujari events, but one of our other temples does. So it could be that it's let's say a school in Leicester in the UK contacts the local Hare Krishna center and they want the Hare Krishnas to come to their school to give a talk. Well, the center wouldn't do that, but they'd call on another member of the league to go and do it.
Mm.
That would be the Hare Krishna project. And in return, if we're asked by some people in Birmingham in the UK to go and do some pujari services, we wouldn't do that. I'm not second initiated, not yet. I mean, that's something else I can talk about in a minute. The centre in Leicester have pujaris, so they could send pujaris for whatever that event is. And the second thing is it's quite a big thing, actually, and I just alluded to it, is access to initiation. So at the moment, for example, in the Hare Krishna project, our team and the Hare Krishna Centre in Leicester, we don't have any Diksha gurus, but the temple in France does. So, for example, we have a number of devotees here who've been serving at the Hare Krishna project for some time, and they're not initiated in that Diksha sense. So if they want to get initiated, well, of course, you've got to form a relationship with the guru that's natural anyway. I'm not into forced initiation. However, there is an opportunity to build a relationship with a Diksha guru already in the network. So that temple over there can offer, it's like a business, isn't it? Diksha initiations. And another temple we're talking to in Eastern Europe doesn't have any sannyasis or Diksha gurus. And we already have 2 sannyasis in the network and a Diksha guru. So upon building a relationship with them, you might want to take initiation. So that's a big thing that we can offer, is that actually groups have been alienated from for a long time. That if they want the Diksha initiation, you don't have to. I mean, Prabhupada said you're initiated by reading my books.
Diksha literally means Divya Gyan, and Prabhupada's books are
Yeah.
full of Divya Gyan.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So, yeah, well, what I can really hear in that, Prabhu, is just your detachment from, you know, politics and institutions, like to be about initiation that, hey, you can go over there. You don't have to go to a specific sangha. I'm not attached to you. Yeah, there's just no politics where you are. Like over there with you, there's just no, there's no political agenda. So I appreciate that about you and the League of Devotees. It's very like I said, it's the League of Devotees. The way it's occurring for me is just like it's about having unity where there isn't currently. Like you said, Kali Yuga is so divisive. Even in the Christian church, there are so many denominations, and it's looking like as time Kali Yuga progresses or devolves, there's just more and more division, and the League of Devotees seems to me as a kind of a space where that's not happening, where it's like actually let's heal these fractions, these divorced limbs. Let's chuck them, put them back on the. They're like branches that have fallen off the Chaitanya tree unnecessarily, or that they're actually branches of the Chaitanya tree. That Lord Chaitanya's mission has many branches, but it's actually recognizing. It's just recognizing that fact, right? They aren't divorced, right? This branch doesn't have to view the other branch as some deviation. No, it's just another branch, and maybe they have some fruits over there that we can utilize over here, and maybe we can provide the fruits that we've got on our branch over there if they need. So I think it's really beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you for your kind words and your compliments. I appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just acknowledging what you're doing, and in doing that, I forgot my last question about the League of Devotees. But I think, the point of me having, inviting you on to speak with me, and it is really to celebrate what you're up to and share what you're up to and give people a sense of what you're up to and what the League of Devotees is because it's pretty underground right now. Not that many people know about it. I didn't know about it before you told me. So yeah, I think the mission is accomplished. I think it's been pretty well. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Um, you said, at the start of the interview, you said you've got a lot of answers and a lot of things that about the League of
In
Devotees.
term, I mean, in terms of the League of Devotees, that's it. It's a new experience for us. It's an evolving network, and we're excited about where it's going to go.
Mm,
And I feel like there isn't enough time in the day to do all of these things.
mhm,
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential, but we don't want to run before we can walk. So
mm,
we're seeing how it goes,
mm.
and just trusting in Lord Krishna and Prabhupada. What do they want to happen? It's not
Yeah,
about what we want; it's about what they want.
that's really cool. That's that's nice. Yeah, that's a Krishna conscious approach to a project. Jai.
Haribol, Jai, Hare Krishna.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for the conversation, Peru, and I really wish you all success with your endeavors and your service to Sri Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. And yeah, if there's any way that I can be of service to the League of Devotees, maybe some Krishna conscious graffiti. Holler, holler.
Yeah, you could do some savor for us. Yeah,
Got a brick wall.
yeah,
On your man.
yeah. We'll fly you over to Europe or something to graffiti a
Unless my
brick wall.
family can come.